Hello.
Hi.
I don't know why Facebook is showing me all sorts of things, but let me just minimize my going live video. Say, here we are. I don't need that window. Close that. And welcome to Grandfather William Commander's trial session for our spring equinox event tomorrow. And I'm taking us back to really the initial thread of our work, the Circle of All Nations presentation on the legacy work of Indigenous elder William Commander, and our 2021 Circle of All Nations February 14th Facebook live video event, which we hosted a few weeks ago, and which we initiated with our geocosmic prayer that we discussed, that captures really the spirit of our work of Grandfather William Commander. And then in February, I'm introducing you to our keynote speaker, Carolyn Andison, who talked about children and the building of nations. And was an exploration of the building a legacy of hope by some folk will recall that we weren't able to actually say presentation again. Carolyn Anderson, thank you very much for joining me today to share this part of your research. I know you do research on all sorts of things, and I'm really grateful to have learned so many things from you. And this little live video that we're hopefully recording properly today will be part of our video documentaries on our Circle Facebook page. And it will serve as the link between February's session, where we talked about children and the legacy of hope, lead us to tomorrow's session, where we're now talking about spring that's coming here for us in North America, but also the fall equinox happening in other parts of the world. And of course, now we have to be very careful about how we describe equinox, because we've got so many global partners in our work. But now, you recall in January, we spent a lot of time talking about the geocosmic. Then in February, the hope for children. And now you're finishing off that thread for us by doing your marvelous presentation again. Thank you very much, and over to you.
Thank you, Romola. Thank you for inviting me. And my name is Carolyn Andison. My maiden name is Martlock. So I come from a very large history of different kinds of diversified culture, you know. And my grandfather was a British home child. He was from England. And I didn't know this when I was younger until I was older and he had passed on by that time. But I got to do a lot of research on him. And he was a sapper, a young sapper in World War I. And then he was in World War II, he was with the Cameron Highlanders. And as a sapper, too, in World War I, he was with the Expeditionary Forces. And when I started researching his life, I found out that he was a British home child and he had come here. He told my grandmother, he said he came here at 16 because they had an embarrassment about being a home child. They didn't want to be called home children. Many of them, I can't speak for everyone, but my grandfather was very secretive about his life and his occurrences because he said, when you grow up, you know, I'll tell you more. But he had gotten different medals in the army and everything else, and it was a long story. But I started researching because of him, and then I came across why he came to Canada, what was happening with British home children. And from 1869 until 1930, Dr. Bernardo were sending children to Canada. and he made it a business. I get the more I've read since time's gone by, at first I thought he was quite a hero. And people still, deem him to be a hero to send all these children to Canada. But as I read, I think he was also an upper echelon bureaucracy, what is it called, like a bourgeoisie, where he had a certain bunch of friends that were all elite and very wealthy. And so he contacted the wealthy in Canada, like Mr. Coe from Peterborough. And Mr. Coe opened a child institute for girls in Peterborough to send girls from England over to be domestics. And then he sent little boys to be adopted. Bernardo liked the age 11. That was his favorite age. This is one of the books that I was reading about. I don't know if you can see this here. There, I can see it up there.
Yes, I can.
See this?
And if you hold it back a little bit, then we'll be able to see also the name of the writer, Gail Corbett. Okay, thank you.
And this has the homes, pictures of homes that he sent the children to. This has the why and the wherefore, how he started, who he got involved, like the women that he got involved to take children across on ships. And they were taking children, 150 of them at a time or more. And Reverend Thomas Newman, he was the one that brought my grandfather over on a ship called the Tunisian. And it left from Liverpool. And most of them, I think there was about 6 of them, if I'm not mistaken, there were 6 ships that brought children over. And they usually had at least 150 children at a time. And they brought them in the ships. So he came here, and, they send them as a domestic, working laborer, domestics for the girls, laborers for the boys, and they'd send them to farms. And there's a good book by Bagnall called The Little Immigrants, and that'll explain everything. And you cry through that book because you see the hardships, you see the sorrow of the children, you see the misuse of the children, the abuse, and it's child abuse. And some of them weren't child abuse. Some of them were sent to like a blacksmith and learned a trade, and were quite okay. But some other ones in the remote farms and that, it was just a luck of the draw where you were sent. There was one story about 2, little brother and sister, and he was always, I'm skipping here, but Bernardo was always sort of manufacturing them as the little thieves of London, like in the movie Oliver. And so as soon as somebody would get a child like that, they'd think, oh, they're nothing but a thief. Maybe they lied to me. So they would treat the child like a very bad person. And so in many cases, in remote areas and in farms and that, where the child had nowhere to run to. So it started that way. And then as time progressed, Bernardo, I think, there was demand for him to send some person to oversee how the children fared once they were there, because there was all kinds of stories coming out. Some of the young girls ran away and they never saw them again, Some of the kids were murdered and buried in a backyard. So there was all kinds of horrible stories. There was good stories. There was a mixture. But sometimes we're grateful in Canada for these children to have been here, because it made Canada what it is today, like the children. But Canada was based on children. It wasn't based on adults coming here as good pioneers and everything. After in 1869 or whenever it all started, like in the 1800s, it was just based on child labor, and it's really sad to see that in children. And so these are your grandparents that you don't even realize and you don't know about. And some of the people today, they will never know the truth because the parent hid it so badly. There was one book, a girlfriend came to my house one day and she gave it to me. And this is another one. It's called Charlie. And this is a fascinating book, but it was an eye-opener for me, because Charlie followed my grandfather's footsteps. He became a sapper for the Expeditionary Forces. He became one of the RCMP people. He joined the RCMP for 20-some years. My grandfather was only in it from 1920 to 24. But they still went the same places. And then when World War II came, my grandfather went to World War II. And where did he go? Lansdowne Park. And who was in Lansdowne Park? It was the Cameron Highlanders of Ottawa that were, enlisting the people, the young men, to go to war for the Second World War. And so my grandfather was there, but how many more home children were there? And was it just the home children that they were letting know, hey, let's go to war? And so what if they get shot, Like, I'm sure a lot of other people got shot. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying that the flux of people that were going there, if you do an investigation, you might be surprised to find out that, 3/4 of them may have been home children, because they might have been contacted to say, do your duty, join the service, whatever. Because there was thousands of children sent over, And so I did a poster.
Yes, you actually did that poster during one of our Circle of All events when we were
Yes.
able to do it live at the Public
Yes.
Service Commission meeting. Yes. Unfortunately, of course, COVID means we can't do that, but I'm glad you've kept your poster intact. And please, I see like 3/4 of it right now.
Yeah, I know, it's kind of hard to show it in here.
But you'll show us some of the sections that you want to talk
I can talk about
to.
some of the sections.
Exactly.
This was the home children. This is not the home children. This is the mining children in England.
Okay.
And it was how they treated children, put them in mines. And some of them were born in the mine from the mother that was working there, that was once a child, and she grew up. And they would rape them sometimes, whatever. They would rape them in the mine when the women had these beads around them, and they were wearing nothing but a pair of shorts, and they would be brought down to the bottom of the mine and have to walk on all fours all day long. Like, I think this picture depicts it here, the girls walking.
Wow.
And so they have a chain between their legs, and they're hooked to a wagon, and they have to pull the coal back and forth to the coal mine. And that was their whole life. So there was an article with this that was talking about how they wouldn't let them out of the mine. And one young boy that was working there fell in love with her.
Okay.
And wanted a normal life.
Okay. You might be blocking off the mic a little bit, so.
Oh.
Okay.
Is that better?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. So what happened with this? They were talking about a young girl and a guy that fell in love, and they left the mine. And they were the people that ran the mine were totally against it, because they said she was born in the mine. She had no domestic abilities. She couldn't be a wife. She couldn't cook. And I mean, when you think of the comparison of being a wife and cooking and looking after a house for a man in those days, what's the difference between that and on all fours all day long pulling a cart?
That's a very
interesting
part of the history that not too many people know about at all.
No, exactly. And then this building here, I believe this is where my grandfather was sent. More research on it. This building's on Wellington Street, and it has a plaque on it, and that's when I copied the plaque here, and I don't know if you could even read it. I'm not sure. I can't see what I'm doing here. Here. Maybe I could get it in there better. But this plaque is on Wellington Street. You can walk by there and read it. It's almost across from the church there. It's sort of probably towards the west. Walk towards the west end from the church, across the street, and you'll go right into it. You'll see it. And
okay, shall I? If you hold it back up there, I could read it perhaps for you. And the plaque says "Home Children," beginning in 1889. I'm not exactly seeing the date clearly. British charitable societies removed children from perhaps homes and orphans in the okay, I think you will have to turn it around and actually read it.
Okay, I'll turn around and read it for you.
Yeah, please do. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. It says "Home Children." Beginning in 1869, British charitable societies removed children from slums and orphanages in congested industrial cities and brought them to Canada to serve as cheap farm and domestic labor. Homes were set up across the country to house the girls and the boys until they were placed in service. Monitoring to the children after placement was superficial, leaving them susceptible to mistreatment. Child immigration was discontinued in the 1930s when the Great Depression created a labor surplus in Canada. By then, up to 100,000 children had been transported. This building, formerly known as St. George's Home, was one of many distribution centers in Ontario. And you can see the address in here, and it's 1153 Wellington in Ottawa.
Okay, so part of our...
If anyone wants to go there. I went around the side of it. Pardon?
part of our questionable
I went
history.
around the side of this. You're cut out. You cut out.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I can't hear you. If you go on the side of the building, a young man was playing ball out there, and he was saying that there's a priest in there that can answer questions, but that's about it. No one else is there now. But it's quite an interesting building. See, this is it here. It's very beautiful when you see it outside. Yeah, I think that's it. It looks like the same building. I mean, I was taking pictures of different ones, and it could, maybe it's not. You'd have to go down and see it, because I know for sure this is it. Because these are all different other buildings that Bernardo made in England. Like, he got all these different people and institutions. This is one of his favorite people here. This is Mr. Coe. And what was he called? Senator George Albertus. It was not Coe, it's Cox, C-O-X. And he was the mayor of Peterborough from 1872 to 1874, and then again in 1884 and 1885. And he's one of the people that gave the housing for the children.
Okay.
Like he donated the place for the baby castle.
Oh.
I don't know if it was, this is the baby's castle here. It's Hawkhurst. I don't know if you can see that.
Okay.
Today, if anyone wants to visit, if they have relatives and they want to try to find them, and they can see if they're on the list, maybe they have some sort of connection that you can start there.
Why was it called the baby castle?
They would bring the mothers over here from workhouses, and the mothers with their children. And when the mothers got here, they didn't know it, but because they said to them to come there, to get out of the workhouse, you could be a domestic, you could work as a domestic, which was the truth. But when they got here, they had their children on the ship, and when they got off the ship, they were people there to take the children out of their hands, the babies. And they said, you're going to one place, and until you can pay your passage, we're keeping your child. So they'd take the child to the baby castle, and they would get adopted people to adopt the children in Canada. They had an adoption agency.
So interesting. You know what Native people talk about as the 60s school, where children were adopted out. The practice was already instated in Peterborough and elsewhere in more than a century earlier.
Yeah, and this was the main place here, this place in Peterborough. And that's for children, babies only. But this one here, let me see now if I can see it here. There was another one. This is Peterborough. I think this is it. Miss Bessie Cody at Hazelbrae. And Hazelbrae was for little girls, I think. There was a girls' one in Peterborough. And they would take young girls and they'd send them off as domestics. But they would bring them from England and bring them to here. A lot of them got raped and had children. My grandfather's sister was taken first, and I thought that might be why he got into being brought over as a home child, because I think he wanted to find his sister. And a lot of them did that too. But the sister was Mabel, and she, wherever she was sent, they impregnated her, the guy that was the home where they were sent, where she was sent. And then she was sent back in disgrace that she was pregnant, because that's what they would do to the girls. And she was like 14 years old.
Wow.
So that's his sister. So things were happening like that, but it's all covered up, because when I was talking to a British person that said, oh, Bernardo was wonderful. You know, look at all the good things he did. Because I guess they were in sort of a depression or a slump, and the children, a lot of them lost their parents from wars, and they were on the street. But at the same time, he didn't do such a good job, in my opinion, and that's just my own opinion from all the reading that I did and all the things that I saw that happened, you know? Okay. Like, he sent children here, but he didn't send any watchdogs to see that they're okay once they got here. Okay. And some of the remote areas, they buried them in the backyard, they starved them to death, you know, they beat them. It was, not everything is bad, though. So it's, you know, I don't know if it's half and half or 3/4 were bad and 1/4 was good. I don't know, because somebody could do a research on that.
Well, you know, the real reason I think we wanted to introduce this discussion a few years ago was because we saw that there were some problems in the way services to children are provided today. And, and also some of the structural methodologies that impact all our institutions. And we began to realize that perhaps a lot of our leadership come from traumatized family backgrounds, where some of that trauma has not been aired, has not been shared, has not been healed. And in which case, structure has obviously provided people with a certain level of security. And you mentioned that when you talk about the RCMP structure, the rules of the organization, the armed forces, and the rules of the organizations that gave people a certain level of safeness. But at the same time, our recent concerns about both the RCMP and the armed forces and other institutions have also showed the systemic abuses that have continued to erupt even to this present day. And I guess
Mhm.
what we wanted to do was to say, hey, we need to do some reflection in order to heal those energies of the past, because in that systemic constellation way, the trauma continues. And of course, a few years ago, Canada had the Romola Commission and it was worrying about the physical health of people. But in
Mhm.
fact, we realize right now the mental health challenges, the challenges of post-traumatic stress disorder, et cetera, are impacting all of us, and increasingly so now that we have the isolation of COVID. So I guess why I'm really interested in this history that you present is so that people can perhaps come to terms with some of the angst that might lie in families in order for us to really, really breathe a legacy of hope for children into the future.
You say it much better than I can. What I did too is I noticed that in our system today, in the child care, the children's aid, in Ottawa, we have children's aid. And I had an experience once with my children where, they were fighting a lot. And I was one parent that had twins. So twins do fight, I've been told. And, I thought, well, it's normal. But I just felt I couldn't take the stress. And so I took them to a doctor at CHIO that works with children that are twins, like multiple births and stuff like this. This is one of his specialties. And he talked to us for 15 minutes, a week or something. We have a little session and then they go on their merry way. And I thought it would be good for them because I wasn't with their father at the time. And I thought a male image would be good for them. Then he suggested that one of them was out getting out of hand. And he said to go, and he would contact for me the children's aid to have a worker come over and see how they were. It was quite funny actually because the girls are very smart, you know. And she came to the house and sat there, told us to sit around a table. And she sits there, a complete stranger, my name is such and such. And she's sitting there. Say, well, I'll call her Sandy. And so she goes, oh, girls, you're very nice. You're so polite. And she left after 15 minutes. But they just sat there for 15 minutes and did nothing. So the next session was the same, the next one. So she comes back and she said, I think my job is done. You do not have a problem with your children. I said, oh, really? I said to my daughter, to one of them, I said, could you please go in the bedroom and get those CDs that I took from the two of you? Oh, yeah, Mom. She rushes in the bedroom, grabs the CDs, brings them there. And it was the time of the Spice Girls and the Backstreet Boys. And both of them said the Backstreet Boys belonged to them. And both of them said the Spice Girls belonged to them. So I said, girls, could you sort this out between you and just give each other your cassettes? Well, the cassettes flew right up in the air. Some of them hit the ceiling and they were fighting like cats. And she just sat there. And I think she was catatonic. She couldn't do anything. And I thought it was so funny. My sense of humor kicked in there because I just thought, well, I live with it every day. They come in for 15 minutes and make judgment. One of them came into my house the first session, and it was a lady that was retiring that day, and she had a man with her, and the man was young, and he's looking down his nose at me, and they blame the parent. They don't look at the children and say the children might be vying for attention. These were twins, so they were always clashing, and they don't look at that. They looked at me and were accusing me, and I did nothing. So they said, what has been happening lately? Mom took the TV set away. And I said, it's only 13 inches, and they're fighting to see who could be in front of it. And so I put in the closet, Mom, could you go and get it, please? I said they had to have it taken away for 2 weeks. This is the second week. She told me to go get it, and then she said, give it back to them. Now that's undermining my authority. And that's what I think is wrong with the system today, is that these people are not, they're trained in universities, they're trained in schools to be a social worker. They know, some of them have never been married, and they know nothing about children. That's my take on it, because I had more experience, you know. But I mean, I came out as a good parent. They said I was a good parent. They gave me kudos, but at the same time, you know, I was under the gun because under a microscope to see if I was a good parent.
Okay.
And I feel bad for other parents to go through that.
Yeah, because I know also you've talked at other times about the number of activities that you engaged your children in, so that they could develop, leadership skills, gain confidence, acquire practical skills, acquire communication skills. I think you took them on boating um, experiences where they learned how to navigate boats and things like that, right?
Yeah, I took them on the tall ships.
The tall ships. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, it's the Jack. What is it? Blackjack. It's at where is it called? The yacht club, Britannia Yacht Club.
Okay.
But I also put them in Carlton in computers for the summer day camps too. And then I put them in Ottawa U, and they made some what is it called, root beer, and then they made lip balm. I did everything.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, you see, the point I suppose I'm trying to make in terms of just the series of live videos that we're presenting from the Circle of All Nations perspective is that we want to see an integration of many ideas that contribute to knowledge generation, and some of those ideas come from Indigenous, and of course Grandfather Commander inspires us in that thread, but it comes from grassroots folk, it comes from ordinary folk like you and I, who've had to struggle and challenge and learn how to manage children and our relationships with children. But it's also looking at some of the practices that have contributed really to a kind of fear amongst adult administrators of programs. And I think the airing and the healing of perhaps some of the root causes of trauma will contribute then to an acceptance of the creative ideas that you've also shared, to the professional workers learning from that grounded approach, and also then taking those ideas into the academic, into the social work worlds and things like that, because of course it's only just a year or so ago that the childcare system here in Canada got really bad marks for its support, and of course over there we're looking particularly at vulnerable children, the same vulnerable children you're talking about from 150 years ago. And so we're really wanting to see, a lot of that shift. At
you don't know the structure.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt you, but you don't know the structure if you get like myself. You don't know where I'm coming from, my background. You don't know who my parents were or my grandparents were. I feel I have a very strong structure in Canada, but if you don't know me, you don't know anything about me, and then you come to judge me and my children, I think that they're not educated enough to do that and to do a good job of it. I think there are normally some people that are women that need help and they're not good mothers, just like there's not good fathers, you know, but there's very good fathers and very good mothers. So I think they have to give the system a chance to understand the parent before they judge, before they paint everybody in the same box, you know. My daughter had a bad accident, and I had to cancel with this male, and this male worker from the Children's Aid, because that's where they put me. And, you know, he started to accuse me of things and I didn't do anything. So I went right down there and I showed him my child and he said, I'm so sorry, take her home, because her face was all hurt, you know. And then he started to be nice to me. Now, does it take that to be nice? I don't know, you know.
Yeah. And of course, you are obviously very articulate and you're able to share many thoughts with people. But of course, we're also dealing increasingly with vulnerable people, immigrant, refugee families, racially isolated and marginalized people. So there's so much greater a need to understand the complexities of child and
Yeah.
child
Yeah.
care. So to go back then, how would you finish off our conversation with respect to the home children, the evolution, and what would you see as
Yeah.
your hope for the future?
Well, as far as the home children go, I'm grateful for them because I had a fantastic grandfather. You couldn't get better. And I was like, out of all my family, even my mother and father and that, they said my grandmother 3 years after he died said that I was his favorite. And I knew that he was my favorite, out of even my parents, because I learned so much from him. He grew up at Thorsby Estate and he could hunt and he could duck hunt. He could do so many things, sports and everything, and that I admired him and I learned from him. And I'm graciously thankful for having him in my life. So I think that that was a good thing that came out of this importation of children or exportation. But at the same time, uh, I find that there's so many history things that you haven't hit on yet. I mean, you know, um, my other side of the family came here as immigrants, and they farmed, and they were the first in areas that started the whole area. And then I go to my French Canadian family, and they were the first to start other towns and cities. So once you start reading about Canada and collecting things, books, you learn, you know. Um, I started to, this past year, I was just making it more of an effort to collect books on Bowmanville, books on Eganville, books on Renfrew, books on, where else? Armprior. So I have all of those. And every time I go to a fair or one of these antique places, I'm looking for those books because you can't find them all over. And this is what I think we should delve into more. The beginning of towns and
Okay.
who started the town and all that stuff. And we'll learn more about Canada. I don't think this is taught in school. Why are we wasting our time learning about the British monarchy when we don't know anything about Canada? Just a thought.
Okay. Well, that's a very good thought for us to, draw to a close around. And of course, it's relevant in terms of what are the roots beyond that. And of course,
Mhm.
the backdrop of Canada are the Indigenous peoples on all those lands in Bowmanville. And these are all part of the Grandfather William Command territory. So
Mhm.
people elsewhere will know we're talking about the vicinity of Ottawa, the capital city, the land of the Algonquins of the Ottawa River watershed.
Mhm.
And they have largely disappeared off many of these landscapes. And in the practices of either the isolation or diminishment of the indigenous identity, the native identity, and however children were born, whether they were clandestine relationships or whatever. One of my friends talks about this as the genocide factor when
Mhm.
indigenous peoples like him had to camouflage their indigenous roots and assume the identity of the newcomers and therefore lost a lot of their culture, heritage, language, connection with the land. But I say, having studied some of this both from my work in the criminal justice system and elsewhere,
Mhm.
realize that most of us, myself included, I come from South Africa, and I'm already an implant because my roots are Indian.
Mhm.
Already, we come to Canada with traumatized backgrounds. We've already had disruption in our lives, in our flow of lives. And I say in Canada, the safety net has been the traditional values of the indigenous peoples. And when it comes to children, the indigenous peoples always, um, talked about keeping the land sacred for the seventh generation. Um, uh, uh, uh,
Mhm.
the earlier text would say children wouldn't be bossed around. People would talk, would teach, and engage with children in a totally different way than we've come to do. As a matter of fact, next time we talk about this subject, and maybe we'll do it in the next couple of weeks, we've done some research in terms of Indigenous approaches to child and youth care work. And I want to share that. I want that to be part of our records here because we started to develop this thread with grandfather William Commander quite a few years ago. And so, what I'm saying is, so many of us come from lots of trauma elsewhere, Europe, Africa, India. It's only in Canada that there was such a safety social network related to children, related to people, related to justice, related to uh, economic sharing, universal health care. All of these things were priorities for the communities. At this stage, Indigenous peoples are most marginalized and most likely to be oppressed by absence of support. So something needs to be addressed in transforming the reality of Canada, and some of that needs to look at our own roots
Uh-huh.
and vulnerabilities in order really to prepare for a stronger Canada that can be flexible and accommodate the huge diversity and the growing needs and in a time of global crisis.
Uh-huh.
So we need like a larger vision, and it seems to me this is well, for grandfather commander anyway, one place of hope, and we're wanting to fan his eternal prayer for hope for all our children.
I met one commander in 2005. I was grateful to meet him because he looked like my French Canadian family. And he spoke French, and he spoke English, and he spoke Algonquin. And I thought, what an amazing man. And this was all in 5 minutes. You know, I'm sitting there with my camera trying to take a picture of him in the tent on the island of Victoria Island in 2005. And I saw him and I thought, he's fascinating. And I went up to him, a complete stranger. I was there early and he was sitting there alone. And I said, may I take your picture? And he said, yes, because I thought he was a good, gorgeous looking grandpa. So I went to ask him to take his picture. And I thought, then I find out he was a chief, you know. And I said, I walk into things just but you invited me, you and he both to his home, and I had tea and a great chat, and it was so wonderful. He was just such a natural person, you know, to speak to and sit with and chat with and talk about books. You know, it was just a very special moment in my time of life. So I appreciated it, and then I read his book more and more, your book, and you did, the book that you shared together in the making. It was wonderful.
Okay.
You know.
Well, thank you. Well, you know what? Let's have another conversation some other time. And that
Uh-huh.
really pertains to the other item that you were engaged with him, and that was his challenge of the uranium. We won't go into
Yes.
it in great detail right now, but I know you were
Not
very
today.
active in that work as well. So I suppose he drew you
But
into his circle.
yeah, to end it too, this Charlie that I spoke about, okay, this is a little British child, right? But there's a book almost like one that I would put together in my bookcase when I'm reading it. The other one was about a little Indigenous boy that wanted to go home. And he didn't know, he followed a train track to get home. And you saw what he had in his pockets, like a little piece of stick, a little wood that was dear to him, a little flower that was dear to him, all these little things. And he didn't realize that it was 500 miles down the train track to get to his home.
Wow.
So that's a very good book, a very, very interesting. It shows you how things are. And then whenever I want to get my mind at peace, I read Dan George's book. And Dan George's, I just can look at a photograph. I like to do art, as you know. And so I see I can sketch that face, and then there's something written there. Then I turn the page, there's another nice face and something written there. And I could spend hours and I could read that book about 3 times over in one day because it's just so relaxing. It's just beautifully written. And I think we have wonderful authors like that out there.
And it's, yeah, it grounds us really again, and it's a good one to finish off on, the Indigenous message of the land coming through the voice of the Indigenous peoples,
Yeah.
and of course the long journey home, uh, you know that was, of course, the story of the residential school children. And grandfather made a long journey to Spanish to collect children and to be treated very badly by the religious orders that institutionalized
Prevailed,
children.
yeah.
So yeah, we've got a lot of healing, a lot of trauma, and
Mm-hmm.
hopefully these kinds of conversations will enable all of us to go back and put to peace some of the unsettled energies in our own families so that we can build towards uh, yeah
Mm-hmm.
the kind of grounded calm and peace that and your art
Yeah.
brings to you.
Yes. Well, there's something else when you were saying that, and I was thinking of this and the little boy that was trying to find home walking down the train track. I find that the Catholic religion has done a great deal of harm to the Indigenous people. And it's not only the scoop, but it's the harm that they have done mentally. And I think it takes a lot of healing, and I think they should be apologizing. I mean, I might have just opened a bombshell here, but you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Like, I was brought up Catholic and Lutheran, both. And then I went to a Hindu church and I went to other things. So I'm very universal. But I just feel that they owe them something because they were so strict and so high and mighty and calling them savages and saying they're better than that person. Like, how godly can you be, or how close to God can you be when you call somebody something like that and you lord over them? So this is where it has to be rectified.
Yeah, so maybe the Truth and Reconciliation starts to do some of that level of honest self-reflection, and
Yeah.
maybe our efforts will help broaden the base of understanding, bring us to that greater humility that will enable us to move forward. And to finish off with the grandfather commander work, he did say,
Yes.
at some point, people will realize that they will have to come and ask our forgiveness, ask the forgiveness of the indigenous peoples in order to heal themselves, in order to
Mm-hmm.
then begin a fresh journey. So the
Now, the
forgiveness,
indigenous people as a nation, but not an individual, each one, because not all of them are good either. Not all white people are good.
no, it isn't that.
There's good and bad everywhere.
Exactly.
So
But
you have to say it's as a group. You're talking about the nation of people.
yes,
The nation of the indigenous people.
yes. But because you really see the point that from the grandfather William Commander perspective was that there's an unrest and unhappiness amongst all the non-indigenous peoples he saw occupying his land, and he saw that reflected in the people who came to his gatherings, things like that, and he saw the trauma, their need for healing, and he felt that one of the things they have to recognize is that they've occupied space and a
Mm-hmm.
power place over his land and his people. And at some stage, they will have to realize that they did it on the backs of his people. And so they would need to then humble themselves. And in asking for the forgiveness, it's not really so much related to the indigenous, it's to
Yeah.
free themselves so that they can go on to live full and happy and productive lives themselves. So that, I think, is why so many people were attracted to him. But now we can't start another conversation around this. We'll
Yeah.
perhaps do another chat about the indigenous thread and your interest and your linkages with that during
Mm-hmm.
a subsequent.
That sounds very good. The only one thing, what I was going to just say one thing about that, and it's about land ownership.
We're not.
And people that do get land ownership, they don't feel they own anything after they realize that they never own a thing anyway in this country. I'll leave you
Okay.
on that thought,
Okay.
thought for next time.
Okay. Take good care.
You know,
Thank you very much. Bye bye.
thank you. Bye, Romola. Thank you for inviting me.
Okay, I'm
I
closing
appreciate it.
our Zoom now, and I'm then going to the Facebook Live to see that we have, in fact, recorded it properly. If you
Okay.
go to Facebook, I might see you on the chat bar, and we'll just see how that went there. But thank you so much for sharing. Thanks for presenting that poster, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye.
Okay.
Okay, I am now back with our Facebook Live, and let me just see that everything has happened reasonably well. Um, and I'm not exactly sure. Let me see. Okay. Anyway, well, we're gonna go back and say thank you to Facebook for allowing us to do this impromptu live video event and for recording it for us, and to our larger group of friends. We'll see you tomorrow at our March 21st Equinox 2021 Peace Gathering. Thank you. Bye-bye.